Welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased to be with you this evening and to be able to be a part of this panel discussion on the S-Word documentary. I'm Gina Carvalho, and I'm here as Communication Director of the Glendon Association, Psych Alive, and the Santa Barbara Response Network. I hope that all of you had an opportunity to watch this powerful film. I believe it provides a very human face to the often stigmatized topic of suicide. It's based on the work of our colleague, Desiree Stage, whose beautiful website, Live Through This, has had a powerful impact on the lives of many people who tell their stories courageously. I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to be here today to discuss and be part of what can be a difficult subject. I want you to know that throughout this program, we have someone in the breakout room there, a trained volunteer to speak with you if at any point you feel like you need assistance. You can also call the National Suicide Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. You are not alone, and we're here to support you and everyone that has come this evening. And now I'd like to introduce my co-host, Victoria. She's a playwright, producer, and spoken word artist, and works for Bright Youth, who are the co-hosts of this event. It's a nonprofit organization that works with youth to develop leadership and advocacy skills through the performance arts. And Victoria and her partner Mitch have been the support to us all to make this event possible. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. Everybody, I would like to first mention that tonight's hour and 15-minute long session will be recorded and available to view on our website and the SBRN YouTube channel. I want to mention that in order to provide an intimate space to hold this powerful discussion, we've elected for the Zoom format as opposed to the webinar format. We ask that you please be respectful at all times of all attendees and presenters. We embrace this conversation as a community discussion, and we would love to hear your questions and feedback in the chat. Please utilize the chat in an appropriate and respectful way. Disrespect will not be tolerated, and anyone demonstrating inappropriate behavior will be removed from this discussion. We take very seriously the creation of a brave, safe space here tonight. Thank you for your cooperation. Before we begin, I would like to launch a poll. It's going to be coming up on your screen in just a moment. And we would like to know who is in the room today, a little bit of background. Who are we hanging out with for this next hour? So on your screen, you'll see a poll being launched here. Please answer those, and we're going to share the results as they come in.
And feel free to check more than one, because we know that many of us here this evening have been impacted by suicide in more than one way. So feel free to answer as many of these that fit with your experience.
Thank you. Just another couple seconds. It looks like we have 78% of results in. Great. We're lingering now at about 89. So I'm going to share the poll results here with you. So Gina, are you able to see who we have in our space?
I am. So we have 36% here this evening is someone who's lost someone to suicide. 28% are saying that they're someone who struggles with suicidal thoughts. 44% are community members who are curious about learning more. And 48%, so the highest percentage, are mental health professionals who want to hear from us and the others on our panel. Thank you very much for participating. That gives us an idea of who's here. We have a very well balanced participation, so thank you. And so I think we're going to take a moment to see a trailer of the film. Is that right, Victoria?
Absolutely.
So we thought that to enter the space of the film, of this beautiful film, we would show a 3-minute clip. And that'll give you a chance to just dive back in, and then we will open it up to our panelists and our conversation. So enjoy these 3 minutes.
I remember thinking, God, just hold on, because somehow, some way, this is going to make sense.
The reaction of people around me was just, shut up.
Anybody who has lost anyone through suicide, you always say, what did I miss? Why couldn't I save him?
Suicide. That's a scary word, isn't it?
I just always felt like an alien, like a burden.
I started to look for other people like me, and I couldn't find anything. Like, where were these people?
To say I'm an attempt survivor, even say the word suicide, is a record stopper.
I just want people to look into these people's eyes.
Because we've always looked away. You know, hashtag suicide so white.
My name is Leah Harris, and I am a survivor.
When I'm grumpy, I'm an activist. When I'm nice, I'm an advocate.
It's a project about suicide, but I'm focusing on life.
It's not the word suicide that is the problem. It is the deafening silence around it.
We lose 112 people every day. That's bigger than a small jet airplane.
I'm not doing well. I find myself wanting to hurt myself. And I just don't really know how to handle it.
The revolution in mental health is happening, and we are at the forefront.
Is suicide still an option for you?
I don't want it to be.
We're changing a culture.
More and more, it becomes clear to me that I am never alone, that we are never, ever alone.
What would you say to suicide if it was a thing, if it was a person? I'd say, suck it.
This S word, it's only scary if you give it this sort of boogeyman weight.
I used to think, man, maybe life just isn't for everybody. I was done. And I was wrong.
I've watched that a few times preparing for tonight's event. Every time a different part hits me in a different way. It's just so beautifully done. If you haven't had a chance to watch the full film, we're going to put the link in the chat. Open it, bookmark it, make that a priority. Gina, would you like to introduce some of our panelists tonight?
Yep, I would. So first of all, I want to introduce Kalechi Ubuzzo, who we saw in the trailer and is in the film. Thank you so much, Kalechi, for being here and sharing your story. And Kalechi's a Nigerian-American writer and mental health advocate. Her book, We've Been Too Patient, Voices from Radical Mental, elevates lived experience and marginalized voices. Her story of surviving a suicide attempt is featured in the film, The S Word, Oprah Magazine, CBS This Morning with Gayle King. Last year, she was presented at the Yale School's inaugural Mental Health Symposium, and in 2021 named Mental Health Champion by the Steinberg Institute. And Kalechi, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Victoria is going to introduce someone, but she was muted.
Sorry, it's my first day. It's my pleasure to introduce Anthony Rodriguez. Anthony Rodriguez is a 3-time suicide attempt survivor and suicide prevention speaker who has inspired and offered hope to hundreds of individuals who have heard his story of struggle and resilience. He is currently the Operations and Disaster Services Specialist for the Food Bank and a co-founder of the Santa Barbara Response Network. He has worked tirelessly responding to the psychological needs of our community and was named Santa Barbara Hero. Since 2009, he has led volunteers on hundreds of responses to traumatic incidents in the Santa Barbara area. Anthony is co-chair for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Out of the Darkness Walk, and More Than Sad program instructor, as well as the chair of Safeguard the Children. Thank you for being here, Anthony.
Anthony, you're muted as well.
Oh, I
That's
didn't know.
the
I didn't know I was
famous
supposed to
Zoom
speak.
language.
That's why.
Oh,
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
hello, Anthony.
For being here and taking the time to be with us and allowing us to share our thoughts and our minds with you. And we hope that you will get something out of it, whether it's for you or for somebody else. But I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Anthony. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Lisa Firestone. I've had the honor of working closely with Lisa for over 30 years. So I'm really honored that she's here and pleased that she's here with me. She's the Director of Research and Education at the Glendon Association and the Senior Editor at PsychAlive. Lisa's a suicidologist and clinical psychologist in private practice. She does a tremendous amount of professional consultation on the management of high-risk clients and individuals. She's a co-author of several books, including The Self Under Siege, Conquer Your Critical Inner Voice, Creating a Life of Meaning and Compassion, as well as numerous articles and chapters. Lisa's a regular and popular blogger on Psychology Today and PsychAlive, and also a trainer on the subjects of couple relationships, parenting, and suicide prevention, assessment, and treatment. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Gina. Glad to be here.
Our last panelist this evening that it's my pleasure to introduce to you, Tony Hollandback, Lcsw, is currently the regional manager for the Lompoc region in Santa Barbara County's Behavioral Wellness Program. Prior to relocating to California, Tony had a rich history of providing leadership in the public and private sector for the past 28 years. Tony uses a holistic model of care, which guides his work to embrace all of the diverse and unique aspects of this work with compassion. He has lectured, given trainings, presentations on healing using various traditions from the Native and Indigenous culture. He is honored and grateful to be part of this panel's discussion. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to be here with some amazing people as we hold space for this incredible discussion. Thank you so much for having me.
Tony, if you would be so kind as to lead us all in a breathing exercise to center us for this evening's discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we begin, as both Gina and Victoria have shared, this is a very powerful topic, and it speaks to our hearts, it speaks to our minds, and it speaks to our spirits. So I'd like you for a few moments to let go of the busyness of your day, the emails, the text messages, all of the meetings that you've gone through, and bring yourself to be fully present, fully awake, and fully aware to this discussion, to this topic, and to our ability to hold space for each other in this, what our ancestors and my teachers call a sacred space. So if you could, very deeply and gently, breathe in from your abdomen, deeply inhaling gently, and exhaling. I'd like you to take another deep breath, breathing in deeply into your belly. It's what the Buddhists call having a Buddha belly. Feel that breath of fresh air fill up your lungs, fill up your heart, fill up your throat. Inhaling and exhaling. Breathing in for a third time, releasing any stress, any worry, any concerns, any events that may have taken place today as you're breathing in and breathe out. Feel any stiffness in your neck and your shoulders. Feel any energy in your body that needs to be released. Zoom meetings you've been on, phone calls you've been on, to help you open up yourself, your energy to this conversation, to this Zoom container where we create this energy of connection, of compassion, and storytelling. Breathing in and breathing out. As we continue this conversation, know that your voice, this energy, whatever comes up for you this evening, is a voice that needs to be heard with honor, with reverence, and recognition. We're so grateful you're here with us this evening.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for sharing that with us and grounding us. I'll use that. Thank you. So I really wanted this evening, my intention for this evening was to have a conversation and have the panelists engaging in conversation, but also welcoming the audience to put any questions or comments in the chat. We do want to have you engaged and have you part of this conversation. But I was thinking just personally about asking the panelists, I mean, your impressions of this film and what you felt you were able to take away, or that left what was left when you watched this film inside you. Would you share with us what your reactions or impressions were with the film?
I will. So when I first saw the film, it brought back a lot of feelings, emotions, and it actually reminded me that about an attempt that I never mentioned. And it was an attempt on October 6th, which was just an anniversary. It was in 2006. So, you know, it brought that one back, which I had pushed out of my mind for many reasons, I guess. And it just, it hit. And it was difficult to watch, but yet I needed to watch it because I needed to know that I wasn't alone. And seeing the resilience and strength of all the people that are in this film, it reminded me that I need to keep on going, but yet I'm human and I need to remember that. So, you know, pain is pain. When you've been through a lot of struggles, it stays with you, and you can't get that away. But it's, you know, I'm taking it day by day and I'm learning, and just being here with everybody here, seeing all these names and everybody that's participating. I thank you so much for being here, because this is what we need to see, is the support instead of being stigmatized and being shunned and being told that we're not worth it, that we're selfish. It's not like that. I promise you. And so, yeah, the film was, it's a really good film. I really enjoyed it. I needed it.
Lisa, I wondered if you wanted to share how, Lisa Firestone, I know you watched the film and you had responses as well, and I was curious if you're willing to share that.
Yeah, I mean, it left me with a lot of different feelings. I mean, I was really impressed with people's openness and telling their stories, very touched. It was emotional to watch for me. I could feel people's, you know, feelings as they were expressing them. You know, the people who've gone on to embrace life and have lived through this experience, you know, their struggles are really touching and it's really meaningful. And I appreciate that. I also was really touched by the pictures. I think Desiree is just an amazing artist in her photography, and pictures are beautiful. I mean, that's touching too. And knowing her personally, I'm touched by that aspect of her, you know, and impressed all over again watching the film. But for each person, their the bravery of, coming out and talking about these things and, sharing their stories, I think makes a huge impact on people, like what Anthony's saying. And it really, helps people. And, I think it's just so important. And I really appreciate everyone who shared their story in this movie a lot.
How is it for you, Kalechi? Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. How's it for you watching the film and being in it and sharing it with the world?
Well, I will say when I said yes to the film, I was like, no one's ever really gonna see this, right? So I think honestly it's been such a powerful experience and journey. And also I really had to make some decisions about disclosure. Like, all right, once it's out there, it's out there. Maybe some folks will have feelings about me. Maybe I won't get certain jobs. But I felt like it was more important, like to Anthony's point before about like shame and stigma. Like I just was like, I thought I was the only one. And I did not realize how many, I think the biggest thing I realized, like, there's a lot of survivors. There's a lot of lost survivors. And I didn't realize how big it was and how much it would impact people. And even if they were whispering to me in groceries, like, I saw the film, I'm also part, but like, I'm never going to tell anyone. I just didn't realize the impact. And I think the other thing that really impacted me as well was that we were all so young when we attempted. We were like 9, 13, 7. We had an 18-year-old, 20. So for the first attempt, and the thoughts came before the attempt, I think what really struck me was that I thought I was the only young person thinking about this. And the messages that I got when we tried to even share the film was, we can't share this. You can't talk about this. And Lisa Klein, the director of the film, she lost her brother and she lost her father to suicide. And her whole goal was, I want to understand why. And it opened up this big conversation. She found Des, and Des found the world, and is this amazing artist. But I think my big takeaway was just like, wow, all of us experienced this when we were really young. And there were so many different approaches. And the message I heard was, don't talk about it, shut up. We don't experience that. Black people don't have those thoughts. Pray it away. Anything that I think people had good, and these aren't bad people. I just want to say that these are not bad people. It's just the fear was like, we can't talk about this. If we don't talk about it, it's going to go away. And that's not true. We found out this week that there's really high rates of suicidality for 5 to 17-year-olds, higher than they've ever been, at 45% rate, higher than 2019. Children's hospitals nationally are calling for like children's mental health to be talked about. And so I just think you all being in this room today is just a testament to like, okay, we need to have this conversation and we need to like have the dialogue that's healthy, and we can have a safe dialogue about it and not shut it down. So I gave you a whole paragraph and a TED Talk. So good applause.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Kalechi. I mean, when we originally met, we were offered this film through the County Board of Education, the opportunity to screen this because of the need to reach young people and to get, really make people aware of what's going on. And I know, Tony, for you, when we were in conversation and you were introduced with your work with young people, a lot of work with young people in very creative, innovative ways, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and what you're seeing with young people and the film.
Absolutely, and thank you, Gina. And I was going to piggyback off what some of the other panelists had shared, that it's so enlightening for me that this is 2021 and we're having a conversation about giving ourselves permission to openly and freely share our pain. It just baffles my mind. You would never say to someone who has HIV or cancer or any other type of situation to be silent. The courage, the vulnerability, the ability to change that narrative that many of us grew up with, which goes across the globe, Right now, this is a national mental health crisis. Part of my own shift in my career, instead of putting off fires, waiting for the suicide attempt, how do we teach people how to heal and to honor their pain? Not to cover it up, not to be silent. I remember growing up in Chicago, and my grandmother and mother told me a story which I had never heard of about my great grandmother. This was my grandmother's, my mom's grandmother, who back then, this is in the 50s, after my great grandfather had passed away, had committed suicide. And you didn't talk about it then. But the pain of the secrecy, the pain of having to keep that silent and not being able to share openly and honestly, you couldn't share this with neighbors. And I grew up in a very Catholic family, and it was considered a sin that something bad would happen, that you wouldn't go to heaven. So all of these old narratives were very woven into all of our cultures. We haven't done this, folks, for over 2 decades. What amazes me, it doesn't matter who you are, what color your skin is, where you're from, we all have the ability and the honor and recognition of being human. And when any of us, you would never tell a small child, keep your pain to yourself, be strong. But so many of us, that was the narrative. Anthony, big boys don't cry, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was told, and I never really learned how to express myself. So that's when all my anger and everything else came out, and I started becoming violent, and I didn't want to be here anymore because I didn't think I was worth it. And I was being told I wasn't worth it because I was getting too much in trouble. And again, like you said, suck it up, deal with it. I'll beat you up, I'll hit you. And this was at my father's funeral when I was 5 years old. I was told that, and I stopped crying. I stopped crying because I was scared I was going to get hit. But honestly, the way I see things now, I'd rather get hit than the words that stuck with me. Because it takes a toll on you, and it's hard. It took a very long time for me to even try to cry. And the day that I cried, I didn't stop I think I fell asleep crying, and I woke up crying, and I cried for a couple of days. And the day when I was done, I felt so much lighter, like I lost 200 pounds, 300 pounds. And it was amazing. It felt weird. It just felt weird. It didn't feel right because I was used to being just angry.
Those are the medicine stories, Anthony. Those are the stories that what I get so inspired in Native Indigenous tradition, folks, is what they call medicine stories. We think of medicine as the traditional medicine that we get at Walgreens, at CVS. The medicine stories come in. That's what this film did for me. That's what each of you do for me. It's creating stories of courage, of hope, of resiliency, of being able to heal and change old beliefs, patterns, and behaviors that many of us grew up in our own culture of origin. And it empowers. When I'm having this conversation now with people in my family, of course it makes sense. You wouldn't tell people who are grieving a loved one, keep your tears to yourself. And yet there's something so powerful and so humbling about this conversation that we can help change the narrative. When I saw all of those statistics of people who are either attempting or have been successful, how do we change that? How do we remind everyone? I came here 2.5 years ago from Chicago, and I had created a campaign in my previous position, and that was called Every Moment Matters, to remind everyone, while you're here on this beautiful earth, you matter. Your beliefs, your voice, your songs, who you are matters. And changing that story gives us a chance to change for the people in our communities.
Victoria, did you had said there were some questions related to what we're talking about in the chat. Do you want to bring those forward?
Absolutely. This question says, how could we break the stigma of mental health when working at school sites, specifically K through 12? I know there's so much regarding this, but perhaps 2 to 3 ways school admin, school personnel could do to help students or youth.
Anyone?
Oh.
Tony and Lisa.
Yeah, Doctor.
Well, I think conversations like this are a good starting place, and I think this would be really valuable for parents to see and school personnel to see and realize that kids are in pain, exactly what you were saying, that this started really young for most of the individuals in this film. Pain starts young, you know, first ideas or thoughts about suicide. It's important to allow space for kids to talk about those and for people to be open to hearing those and respond and just being with people in their pain, knowing that it's okay to talk about it to somebody. You know, the socialization of boys in our culture is still problematic. I wish it wasn't, you know, about not crying. But I think in general, you know, now we want girls to be tough too, right? And not cry. It's not a good thing. People, it's part of being human to have feelings. And if we can let kids feel their feelings and talk about them, you know, that would be a great starting place. And I think this film might open up people to thinking about that differently. And especially the point that you made about that it's people who are young, you know, it doesn't start in older age. It starts when children are really young.
Kalechi, I knew you wanted to talk to this issue earlier on about youth.
Yeah, I think what I would say, what I've seen in different schools, which has been kind of the challenge is that, and I think something worth working through is thinking about what are your policies? Because if someone comes to you and opens up and you immediately shut the conversation down, or they're going to stop being honest with you. So what is one, your capacity to hold conversations without reacting? Like it's not about you. If someone's coming to you, that is a sign of safety. And I think it's hard for people to understand that because they hear the word suicide and they react and like, oh my gosh, I need to call cops. I need to stop the conversation. They are safer because they've reached out to you, but they won't stay safe if when you reached out, you shut it down. They're like, I will never tell you again. Great, I'll keep it to myself. That's what I did. I was like, oh, this is the reaction. I'll just never tell anyone the truth again. Because people reacted so badly to it and then made it my fault. So I think, what is your policy? What is your trauma-informed way of actually having people show up and share their pain? And then how can you de-escalate? And what are the supports? And also I have to say, not everyone's family is supportive. So if you're in a school where someone is coming to you because of their parents, and then you have to then tell their parents, I think it's like, who is the trusted adult that they can identify that can be part of the solution? And it's sometimes not mom and dad. And so just getting more creative about what your policies are so that you can have the conversation. Because if you bring this to a school and start the conversation and then react to it and shut it down, then we're not actually moving the needle at all. We're not helping these young folks.
Tony, go ahead, and then I have a comment on this. Oh, did you want to say something, Tony?
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. With that, I did want to mention that there is some of the schools that we do have here that actually have opened up their policies a bit to allow me to go into the schools to talk with the kids myself. I just went to San Marcos High School. I went and did the SOS, Signs of Suicide. And I walked around to every single classroom that took that class and introduced myself to the teacher. And I think that if I would have been introduced to the teachers beforehand or been them being told that I was going to be there, then they would have been able to utilize me a lot better. And the student that I did speak with, their counselor reached out to me, very, very nice, very sweet. She asked me, what does she do? And I just said, well, it's up to you, but that's your, whatever your policy is, but I have no problem speaking with this kid. I have no problems. You just have to let me know and I will be that mediator, that bridge for them to finally open up. But we can't allow this, we can't let that slip. We can't let them slip through the cracks. If they talk to me and I let you know, then if they're willing to speak to me, then I'm more than happy to do this. And I did get an email back from the school, and I am going to be speaking with a young man because he said that he's willing to speak with me. And what happens there is that I'm that bridge. That's what I'm there for, is to be that bridge. And Santa Barbara High School actually has used us and used me many, many times. The kids, all I have to say is, I want to talk to Anthony. They don't say anything else, and they just call me and say, hey, Anthony, can you come? Yes, no. And I'm there for the kids, and it would bridge that gap and listen. That's one of the biggest things, is that we forget to listen. We hear things all the time, but listening is a whole different story. And it makes a huge difference, because that's actually what happened to me, is that finally somebody listened, and I wasn't pushed away. I wasn't looked at like I was crazy. My wife said, I don't know what to do, but let's figure this out together, and that made a difference.
Yeah. I was just going to share, Anthony, that, I love this conversation because part of helping to heal the stigma is to help change the culture, not just in the classroom, but with the people teaching in the classroom, with our administrators. Folks, when I've talked to principals and folks on the district level, in any district, whether it be in Illinois or here in California, the mentality is often, well, we have a social worker for that. We have a psychologist for that. When the kids are struggling, they can see that person. But just like we make time for other academic topics, if we're going to create a culture and a classroom of inclusion, having a conversation about suicide or about substance use or about domestic violence. When I was doing teaching and training with administrators, they're struggling with the same stigma they were raised in. Because most of us come from a generation where it was unacceptable to have a conversation like this, especially with strangers. You don't have this conversation outside of the family. So how does that translate into how to help to effectively support our teachers, our decision makers in the schools to being able to change that culture, to allow things like suicide, to have age-appropriate materials for preschoolers, kindergarten children, for culture. You have how many different cultures are represented here in Santa Barbara County? It's a beautifully culturally rich community that we need to be mindful and sensitive that we share materials that are sensitive around language and culture as well. But when we start helping to educate our teachers, our sports coaches, our administrators, our principals, and giving them that permission to include this topic, we begin to see the students follow that, because the students are going to set the tone for what they learn from the school.
Well, I totally agree with Amberly. We have to get to the parents. You have to figure out a way to make them at least, even though they might not like it. As with the Latino families, they just can't stand me sometimes. But you know what? I have to say what I have to say. And we don't like it when people tell us the truth, right? We don't like the truth being told in our face. But there's a lot of parents that denied me to go in and help their kids, but are now calling me, telling me, Anthony, can you help me out? And I'm like, no, because you told me that, even though I will, but I always say no, because that's the only way that they're going to listen and they pay attention. That's when they listen. I don't know what it is about having to deny them for them to actually want it. And it's weird. We shouldn't have to do that. We have to educate and we have to learn and get the word out that, there is ways of dealing with this. And it's a true thing. Mental health conditions and our feelings, depression, everything, it's a real thing. And some of our cultures, they don't get it.
Yeah, what I would say, oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was just thinking what you're saying is in different cultures or different spaces, I've used stealth mental health because not everyone can hear that language. So people will really connect to an experience like, oh, have you been isolated for a year and a half because of COVID? What has that brought up? Loneliness? Has that brought up, are you tired? Sometimes we can't use the labels because they're not that's the end of the conversation, but people can really connect to the experience and what is going to make it accessible to that community. So if you're working with a community, do you have a cultural broker? And sometimes we call it code switching for dominant culture, but for when you're going into communities, how would you break it down so it makes sense for them and that they can not feel scared, because it feels scary. What they've heard about this is all scary. And it's and sometimes data helps too. Hey, we're losing a lot more kids. It's really important to have this conversation. I know it's uncomfortable. I know you love your kids. Let's talk, right? I think meeting people where they're at part is really important too.
Yeah. You nailed it right in the head. That's it. We have to meet them where they're at, honestly.
Victoria, is there anything in the chat that
yes, and it actually
is a lot going on.
Well, this question is sort of perfect for the moment we're in now. Elizabeth asks, locally, when a young person is being released from the hospital after a suicide attempt, what wraparound services are provided to the youth and the family to support them?
That's a good question, Victoria. part of our role in Santa Barbara County Behavioral Wellness is to work with all ages, both children, adolescents, adults, and seniors. And so upon discharge, what typically happens is someone contacts our department and then they get sent to the most appropriate region, Santa Barbara, Lompoc, or Santa Maria. And then they get assessed and screened. And based on their age, we have a program for younger children, ages 5 to 15, called Spirit. Spirit is a very intensive wraparound program where we have a case manager, we have a mental health provider, and we have a parent partner working with all aspects of the case. I love the model we use because it's a very integrated, holistic model, working with the family, working with the school, working with the youth in the home, for stabilization and prevention, along working with a psychiatric provider if medication is involved. We have a similar program with our older youth, ages 16 to 25, called our Transitional Age Youth Full Service Partnership. And that's, again, focusing on older adolescents and young adults with the goal of prevention, to help reduce emergency room admissions, to reduce relapse, kids who are really struggling, and focusing on what we can do to help to stabilize that, not just that youth, but that family, and help them change the story, and ultimately how to help that family heal.
It was interesting, Lisa, you and I had a conversation earlier today. And one thing that you were saying is that often if the subject of suicide comes up, what's called a therapist is called psychiatrist. It's, it just, the person feels like they can't do anything, or that they themselves will not be able to have an impact on the person who's struggling. And there's a lot a person can do. So I just wondered if you'd share that.
Sure. There's a lot anybody can do, which is just being with the person. I think it was Desiree who said it in the movie, which was just sit with them, let them cry, be with them, not trying to change it so fast, or trying to stop it, or trying to tell them what to do, or, have some of the negative consequences that come sometimes with mental health services happen to that person, that it's important just to be with them. And the reality is that's what therapists need to do too, by the way, is be with the person. It's what psychiatrists need to do, is be with the person and see them as the expert on their situation and really listen. That listening thing, really, really important. I think professionals sometimes have trouble with that. They feel like they're supposed to know, and they do a lot of telling people things. The thing is to listen, to really pay attention and just be there with the person. And it's not always professionals who are the best person to do that. It's whoever, with a young person, it's whoever they trust or are willing to open up to. Then if there are appropriate or, good services, like you're talking about, those wraparound services, sounds wonderful, and that's really good. But, it's just important, especially for the first point of contact, for somebody just to listen, no matter who you are. And, when you ask kids in a school who they would talk to, it's not always the social worker or the counselor. It's very often the woman at the front desk at the attendance office, or this janitor who I really like joking around with, or it doesn't matter. It's whoever they feel comfortable with. And that's what's important. And, as you mentioned, it's not always parents either. And that's important to recognize. And Anthony, I know you work hard with the families and you're good at getting to people, but, it really is important that, a lot of parents don't want to hear this about their child. And what they'll do is discourage the young person from speaking up. And that's really not helpful. We need to let kids talk. And it's painful. I mean, I know as a parent myself, and, it's sometimes hard to listen to the fact that our child might be in pain. But if you can listen, that's a really important first step, without trying to talk them out of it, shut them down, say this shouldn't be happening, this can't happen in our family or in our culture or whatever. No, just listen and know that this is what's happening. And not only that, it's not unusual, unfortunately. We have a lot of kids really struggling, and I think it's only been made worse by what we've been through in the last couple of years with the loneliness, the exclusion from peers, because trying to stay safe physically, we've impacted young people's mental health, often in negative ways, unintentionally. But we need to now do some repair around that.
I really appreciate you saying that. it just really resonates with me. I wrote this piece in the book, We've Been Too Patient, about how my friends showed up and how they're friends. None of them were clinicians, but when I just couldn't get out of the bed, like someone would send me groceries, right? Like we know what to do when someone is physically sick. Like we show up, we bring them cards, we call them, we text them, we send them casseroles. Like it is not, I know this sounds wild, it's not that different. I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling disconnected. I want connection. Connection is what keeps us safer. So I'm curious about like, how do we feel more comfortable connecting with people? And like my friends who didn't really want to have a talk, they'd say, you know what, let's go on a walk. Let's go on a walk. Let's get you some walking things. Someone would be like, I know you love vampires. I'm going to send you texts with them every day. That's how I'm going to show up for you. And none of this required a degree. And therapy is really important. Let me be clear. Therapy is important, but that is who my safety net is. And they were able to catch me and say, hey, and not say you're bad, or how could you do this to me? Or like, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, which is I have all my favorite, non-favorite suicide catchphrases that I hear. They just were like, I'm really sorry. That sounds like that sucks. Like, I'm going to just listen. It's so powerful. It's actually less talking than you'd think.
And it's really normalizing that asking for help is about being human. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, but you're reaching out to your tribe. Creating that tribe, that everything that we share, everything we do is a part of making all of those wonderful connections with our friends, connections with people in our faith community, and even in our family. The more we normalize these conversations, the more kids will come forward and say, I'm really struggling. Kids won't have to hide that pain in private because it's unacceptable in our families. It's okay to say I'm hurting and I need some help.
I think that's the reason why I speak up on sexual abuse at a young age. Being a sexual abuse survivor and being male, it's not supposed to happen, and it does. It happens a lot, and it took a lot for me to realize that it wasn't my fault. It was right after my dad died. My voice was taken away when my uncle told me that he was going to beat me for crying. And then I stopped crying, and then a couple months later, after we buried my father, and actually I'm just remembering something too. Somebody else tried to abuse me the day that we went to go drop off flowers for my dad's funeral. But when my uncle started sexually abusing me, it was only a couple months after, and then my voice was taken away again. But that's why I guess I speak up now, because I don't want no kids to feel like they don't have a voice. Because they do, and it's not our fault if we're kids. And it's always good to know that people will be there to believe us. And sometimes there's a lot more pain than we can actually see that a lot of these kids are going through. So we just have to keep an open heart and an open mind.
Yeah, and I think what you said about feeling connected is so important, that we want to feel connected. That's how we feel safe as humans, when we feel connected. And when we feel alone, we don't feel safe, no matter what, And, I think Desiree says it in a presentation, actually, in the film about, realizing that we're really never alone. But that isn't how it feels in those moments, right? And so I think it's so important when we can make people feel connected, that we care. And, I think that's one thing I would like people to take away from this, is that if you're worried about somebody, help them, make them feel connected in however you go about it, whatever way you feel comfortable. But, it really is helpful. And why don't we bring people casseroles, and why don't we, show up for them when they're struggling with mental health issues, just the way we would if they had a physical health issue? We should.
We definitely should. I got a question in the chat. What would you tell a parent who has a child who struggles with thoughts of suicide? I feel like everyone should answer this. Since I was that kid, my mom and she's a huge support system. She was like, baby, I don't want this to happen again. How do we plan? So we made a RAP plan, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And I said, here are the triggers. Here are my warning signs. Here's what we can do if that happens again. And we were just very honest with each other. That, for me, I think people see the film and they're like, you never had a thought again, right? Everything's great. And I'm like, I know you want that happily ever after situation, but suicidal thoughts are part of my life and they come back. Now they tell me to do something different. It doesn't mean I need to not be here, but it's still very uncomfortable. So I will reach out to her. We know what therapist I like. We know what kind of support I want. We know where I'd like to go to eat. We know like I might need to take some time off of work. And I know this is more for like a child, but when I was a teenager, we did actually start doing some crisis planning ahead of time to understand what the triggers were and how we could be more honest and open about it. And just knowing that made me feel safer. Like, oh, she's not going to freak out. We have a plan and we know what's going to happen next. So I don't know if anyone else wants to answer, like what would you tell a parent who has a kid who struggles with thoughts of suicide? But I thought that was a powerful question.
I think it is a really powerful question. And on our website, PsychLive, we have information about creating that kind of safety plan that anybody can walk through with somebody. And it's really important first to draw out their story about how they felt suicidal, about what went into it, because that gives you a lot of clues about what the triggers were for that person. It gives you a lot of clues about what helps them when they're distressed. And you can help them start to plan, things that they can do that help them feel better. People they can talk to, people that'll distract them, things that just activities that sometimes make them feel better, like going to their favorite place or getting their favorite food or whatever it might be. All those things are important. What works for them? And, doing that kind of plan is a really important thing. Getting access to mental health services if you feel like your child needs it is important. Finding the right people that they do feel comfortable with. And one thing I always say to people about therapy is that it's important to shop, to try some different therapists and see who you feel comfortable with. And, I think that's really important because it has to be a fit for you or it's not going to be as effective. And that's true for a child too. Do they feel comfortable? This is not just who mom or dad is choosing, but who do they feel comfortable with? Because that's what's going to make the difference.
There's a lot going on in the chat that Gina, if it's okay with you, I'd like to hang a lantern on.
Yeah, there is one thing I can answer right away about PsychLive. Lisa had mentioned that. I did put in the chat, if you go to psychalive.org and in the suicide prevention advice section, we have a tremendous amount of information in there. So it's in the chat. There's a link in there for people. And they can always, I'm going to put my email at the end and in the chat. You can always email me with any questions that don't get answered in the chat. And I will make sure the panelists or myself answer them. And I'll put my email in there right now.
Gina,
Victoria.
Will you double, triple check that you're sending it to all participants because
Okay.
I'm not seeing it in the chat.
Okay.
I wanted to address what seems like a quick question that was circling back to the question about hospitalizations with youth. Now I can't find it, but the asker wanted to know if, oh my goodness, let's see, can somebody else see?
Somebody had asked,
if
go ahead.
Is Be Well alerted every time a young person is hospitalized due to suicide attempt?
That's a great question. Every time there's any type of mental health emergency, which takes place in any hospital throughout Santa Barbara County, there are several different points of entry. One is the safety program, which is a crisis stabilization program through Casa Pacifica. The emergency room can contact, or a safety may have made that referral, and then safety would then make the referral to us, or it could be the emergency room physician who then contacts Be Well, or it could be one of our crisis teams. In each of the regions that we support in Santa Barbara, Lompoc, and Santa Maria, there's a crisis team which is dedicated to doing an evaluation, screening, and making a determination if that child needs hospitalization or adult, as well as when the child or adult is ready to be discharged. So there's a full circle supportive loop to make sure that we're focusing on any of the needs on entry into the hospital, as well as when they get discharged.
And I like the fact that you can advocate and ask for the services whenever you're in a hospital or any place like that, that you have a voice and speak up. I think that's really, really important, that you not be discharged without getting the support services that you need. But also, Kalechi, I really appreciated what you said, and Lisa, about it's always being rational, because suicide becomes such a scary thing that we don't take a practical, rational approach, like what you said about the safety plan, like having that conversation with your mother, having that conversation so that you know what it takes to be safe, what is your, you know, your hope kit, your safety. I just appreciate that, because we often forget that there's a rational element to this as well. Thank you.
We have a comment in the chat that I think is a really good idea if it doesn't exist already. This says, I wonder if there's a hotline for parents to talk to other parents who have youth, sons, daughters who have experienced suicide.
Kalechi, you haven't heard of it. You're muted, but I think you're saying.
I haven't heard of one, but I think that's a really good idea. Maybe Tony has, I mean, like a loss survivors support group, or even for folks who have experienced, you know, have kids who have attempted and want support with each other, because people who have kids who have experienced that, they need their own support too, right? You're keeping it together for your kid, but you need your space to like not keep it together. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know of anything. Tony, have you heard of anything? Or Lisa, I haven't heard.
There is a support group, and I think that there's a phone number as well, and I'd be happy to share this with the circle and then share this with all of the participants about survivors of suicide. So much like for folks who are in recovery, going to Al-Anon or Alateen, it would be a group for if you have lost someone you love or someone that you love has attempted suicide, it gives you the support, it gives you the language, and it helps you decrease the sense of isolation, with the shame and stigma of what you've gone through, but also giving you some of the peer support and some of the tools to help you really be effective and engage with your loved one, your son, your daughter, your neighbor, your niece, your nephew, a sibling, and gives you some of that support to help you with the verbiage and dialogue to really help you effectively support that person. Because even if you are an incredibly loving and compassionate and caring person, most of us who are never trained, how do I respond to someone I love who says they want to end their life? Most of us may not know, what to say in those moments, especially coming from a generation when it wasn't talked about. So I get very excited and very inspired by parents who say, and I love you, I'll do whatever I can, but let's find other resources. But you're absolutely right that it often starts at home. It often starts in the community with people you know. So the more we teach and listen and support our community, the same way that we call 911, the same way that we know CPR saves lives. How do we normalize the conversation that people asking for support can be something about being human?
But I will say calling 911 for everyone isn't a great idea. So I can't not say that. As a Black woman, I just have to, gotta just, I have to own that part.
No, I mean, we had a situation here in Santa Barbara, which we responded to. Somebody had mental health. It was actually one of my friends having a mental health condition, crisis. He was killed. So it's totally understandable. And we responded to that.
Yeah. So as unfortunate it is, I'm glad that both of you said something, because otherwise it doesn't get talked about, that it isn't always safe, right? And I think that's important.
Yeah.
I'm excited about 988, the new number that will be an alternative to calling law enforcement. So when someone's having a mental health crisis, and I hope more peer support will happen there. And again, it's more like, how do we keep this person here? Because no one wants that to happen to a loved one. No one wanted that to happen to your friend, Anthony, and I'm sorry you lost your friend. We want people to stay, and however we can help them stay, and not have folks be afraid of them, because there is a stigma. And I do want to say, like, people who have died by suicide or even suicide attempt survivors, you don't have to have a mental health issue or a diagnosis. I think that's like everyone has mental health and we need to take care of it, but people losing their jobs, there's like a lot of long lists that happens that activate that. So I know we're having the mental health conversation, which is really important, but it doesn't mean you have depression. And I think that's kind of like a myth that I think we don't talk about a lot either.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Yeah, really glad.
One of the most exciting things I can share that our department has done is create what's called a co-response team, because our first responders may not know how to effectively respond to these issues, as well as being able to intervene and de-escalate them. So co-response basically means that a mental health professional will then be partnered with someone in the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department or local police, and it's got an enormous amount of support from the Board of Supervisors, which is very exciting. So it's kind of a national model, as we're all seeing that the reality is a lot of our first responders haven't been trained to effectively deal with mental health and behavioral health issues. So it's very hit and miss in terms of how they respond based on their own training or experiences. So the whole model of co-response is when there is a mental health crisis going on, there is a clinician who is partnering with them, assessing them, stabilizing them. Hospitalization is a last resort. You're looking at what you can do to help you connect with that person, give him or her whatever support they need, and then link them to services effectively. It also takes away any of the punitive aspects of how 911 was contacted, and being able to help someone in that moment. It's a window of opportunity. How can I help you to honor your pain? So I'm excited. I've worked with some incredible co-responders here within our department. It's being expanded to Santa Maria. It's being expanded to other rural parts of Santa Barbara County. And this is becoming, what I'm seeing from colleagues, a national model to begin to partner with mental health providers to offer compassionate mental health care in the community before the crisis happens, before the hospitalization.
It's wonderful. Thanks, Tony. And when is the 3-digit number going live, Kalechi and Lisa? I don't remember.
It's summer of next year. I mean, everyone has to kind of get, they're still task force, they're still figuring things out.
Yeah.
I definitely hope folks will advocate for peer support and family support to be part of that process as well. But yeah, it isn't, I mean, I guess you can call it now, but it's supposed to go live summer of 2022.
Great. That'll be national. Okay.
Yeah. So things are changing.
Yeah, they are. But
we have some questions here in the chat. This one says, I have heard that many of support services in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties for youth in need of mental health services are quite impacted at the moment. Can anybody speak to this?
I can share that the amount and number of referrals that we're seeing is incredibly high, significant. We're seeing an enormous number of youth with all the factors that we're sharing, in addition to COVID, in addition to most of our schools have gone back to in-person instruction. So students are experiencing anxiety, lack of support, families who've gone through economic struggles, substance abuse. Substance abuse in our youth is huge with the number of youth. I'm excited here in Lompoc, we have our first outpatient, youth-driven, peer-driven substance abuse model, which is launching here in Lompoc. It opened up this month, and it's so exciting to have youth have a safe space to share their stories and to get support around their sobriety. So I see everywhere we're going, the number of youth coming into care is really parallel to what's happening throughout our communities. So I'm really grateful that here within Santa Barbara, as well as within our community-based organizations, that there's an enormous amount of support to being able to help to support our youth and our families and our schools to help to address some of these issues successfully. It takes a village, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
And I know, Tony, you do very innovative work with youth. I know you do your drumming circles and you do other very, I think when we're reaching youth, we have to think a lot more creatively and more broadly. So I didn't know if you've got some of those opportunities happening with youth or going to facilitate some of that work.
Thank you so much, Sheena. One of the things that I feel really strongly, and this is such an exciting conversation, is that we don't heal the same way. healing as unique as a fingerprint. So when it comes to therapy groups and medication, part of what was really inspired me in my career is the work of the Native Indigenous people that have been doing this longer before we have what we now know as mental health or physical health care. So I've done this in other settings, and I was really privileged and humbled to be able to offer this here in Santa Barbara County. If you remember, during COVID, we weren't allowed to meet with people in person for all the safety and risk factors, and it was still something that we're navigating through. But using drum circles and connecting our young people and our adults to nature, we've been able to use the sound of the drum and the vibration of the drum to create healing. And this is in sync with cultures all over the world, and being able to create a safe, sacred space for young people to share their story, family support, trauma, coming out issues, LGBTQ, relationship, physical sexual abuse, whatever that young person may be experiencing, to have that safe, sacred space when their voice is heard and their voices are powerful. And being able to use the drum and being able to teach them how to have these open-hearted conversations with the people in their life. Because many of us, especially kids are very intuitive, and they pick up on messages when it's safe and when it's not safe to share information. So by teaching them to use that energy, they can bring that back to their families. They can bring it back to their classrooms. They can move them from a place of fear into a place of hope, into a place of empowerment, and being able to teach the young people who are here, our next generation, how to heal. Using some of these traditions, and I've been privileged to have done trainings in different parts of the county. It's something that I'm very passionate about. Let's not wait for the next crisis to happen. Let's not wait for the next suicide to happen. To really pick up those warning signs and teach. Once you teach people the tools, you can change someone's life. You know that old story, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for life. I tell my kids, I want to give you so many tools that you're going to put me out of business.
Good idea.
So, you don't need this phony anymore, that you've got the skills and tools to love yourself, to love this world, and to know that you're here for a reason, and to give you some of these tools, which I've been gifted with from my elders and from my teachers, but to use some of these traditions and weave that in to what we do in our mental health work is powerful. I've seen kids who said, I didn't know I had a voice, or I didn't know my voice mattered. And being able to do that, and that's what this film, that's what all of you do for me. It reminds us, all of us matter. We have a voice at the table. I tell people, if you want a seat at the table, there'll be a place waiting for you.
Thank you, Tony. I really wanted to take the next few minutes to just have an opportunity to thank you all, but also if you have any last minute things you'd like to share with the audience before we go on. And Victoria, did you have something you wanted to share?
There's one private message question in the chat that I think is really important to address if we have just a couple of moments to hang a lantern on that.
Sure.
This says, how could parents, guardians, community, and school staff improve the mental health well-being for young men of color, specifically Latinx and African American youth?
That's such an important question. And I mean, I'm not a young man of color. So I think the first thing is, where are the young men of color? And are you asking them, are they at the table, and are they informing your work? And where are the leaders of those men, and who do they trust? And can you partner with them and actually listen to them, not tokenize? And this is not anything at anyone personally, but a lot of times communities of color, someone gets asked to come into a place and it's like, oh, actually, we don't do that here. Thank you for being here. And so if you're inviting someone to really do something different, you have to really do something different. So I think first is the invitation and the bridge building, and then understanding what is going on with youth. What is their experience? Because they'll tell you. I think our big conversation has been about listening. I know Anthony can definitely say more from his lived experience, but I just want to uplift, like, they need to be at the table and in the room before you even go anywhere else. And be really clear that you're gonna take that feedback, because that's really disingenuous when that happens. I say that because it's happened to me a lot.
Anthony, do you have anything to add? I really appreciate Kalechi.
No, I mean, I really appreciate that too, because I've been asked to come to the table, and then when they really find out exactly what I've gone through, and it's basically, oh, you don't have a degree, so peace out. I've just been told to that they didn't need me anymore. But yet they'd rather suffer and hurt these kids, or be shut me out just because of my past. My past is my past. And I get judged a lot by that, and it tears me down. But I just, thank you, Kalechi, for reaching out. Right now I'm a little emotional because so Sunday is my birthday, and I never thought I'd ever be here. I was supposed to be dead by the age of 16. My mom had my plot paid off because I was in so much trouble. And people said that I wasn't worth it. I'm just grateful that I'm here, and just seeing everybody that's here. Knowing that you being here, just listening to us makes a difference. And thank you for just listening. And I'm sorry that I've cried. I never expected this. I didn't expect it at all. It caught me off guard. But I know that I'm not being judged, so it's actually pretty nice. So thank you for wanting to learn about this. Thank you for willing to hear it. And thank you for asking for ways to make a difference, because that's what we need. And sometimes our past makes us who we are, and makes us better and more compassionate people to be able to support others. So I just want to say thank you.
Anthony, you're just demonstrating so much bravery, and we are so lucky you're still here. And I'm so glad it's your birthday, and I just want to honor your birthday, and don't hide those tears. People need to see that we're human. We cry and we feel, and for you to just be open about that, that is what he just did, who he is. That's who you need for those young men of color. You need to see that vulnerability is strength. You need to see that, I mean, that's not scripted, that's real. That is real life, and really impactful and beautiful. And I'm really glad you're still here. Thank you.
I just want to share, Anthony, you inspire us. The day of your birth is a day of joy, because thanks to your birth, you were here with us having this conversation, and you are inspiration to this question that Victoria shared on men of color. We are healing from generations of toxic masculinity that teaches that men, especially men of color, are not allowed to be human, are not allowed to share pain, are not allowed to be vulnerable. That the negative images associated with being a man of color, any man, higher rates of heart attacks, higher rates of strokes, higher rates of suicide, so much of in your story. But the fact that you're here with us, and the fact that we've got such a supportive panel, is another testament that we are changing the energy and vibration of this story to say that's no longer acceptable. It's no longer acceptable to hold our pain in silence, and it's no longer acceptable to be judged by our pain, but from ourselves and other people. Love is the most strongest healing medicine, and there's so much love coming from this panel, from this film, and from all of you, and I am grateful. I'm grateful for you, Anthony. Feliz cumpleaños.
And your vulnerability is your strength, Anthony. You offer so much from that place of being willing to be vulnerable. And I genuinely appreciate it as a colleague and a friend. And I have a lot of respect for you.
Yeah. And me too, Anthony. And in the chat, I don't know if you can see it, there's just a river, a waterfall of thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much. Happy birthday. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for being with us here. So Anthony, I want you to hear that this is really touching a lot of people. And happy early birthday. Many, many. What a beautiful way to share this time and come to the end of our time together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to each of our panelists, Kalechi, Tony, Anthony, Lisa, to Victoria, to Mitch, who I don't know if he'll put his camera on, and to Ileana, working their magic in the background to make this event such a meaningful, powerful, and touching event. We would be happy to host more of these conversations. Lisa and I were talking about ways that we could bring more programs like this together. So I think they're destigmatizing mental health issues like suicide and other topics would be really powerful. So we're going to put a poll up now for people if they would like to see more of the idea of a screening and then a conversation. Please choose any one of these or all of them if you like, and we will get together and okay. I think the answers are in.
The answers are coming in. 17.
Yeah, depression, 71%. Unresolved trauma and grief, 88% or 83%.
Yeah.
Anxiety, 78%. Addiction, 50%. And obsessive compulsive disorder, 33%. So we will do some research on maybe doing a similar, having a film screening and then a discussion on the topic. And we'll send out a survey to everyone and keep you engaged and keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Gina. And it wouldn't feel right if I didn't mention that Santa Barbara Response Network is solely supported by donations and grants. And any support will allow them to keep offering psychological support in the community after traumatic events. So if you are feeling inspired, please consider donating at the link in the chat, and we appreciate and see and value you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Grateful for you all.
Grateful, Kalechi.
Happy birthday, Anthony.
Happy birthday, Anthony. Tony. If the panelists want to stay on for a few minutes, that's wonderful. If you need to go, I understand. But we can close it for the others if you want to have just a few minutes together. Just to honor the time and okay.
Anthony, here's my cat wishing you a happy birthday.
Yeah, and thank you. And Mitch, are you there? Can you
Hi, everyone.
Yes, I'm here. Just one moment.
Okay. I want to thank you personally.